Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we have a special guest on the NAACP update. We have former Senator Tom Roberts, our third VP here in the Dayton unit, and also he is the Political Action Chair for the state of Ohio, NAACP. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Ms. Perkins. Good to be here. Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you here because we're going to let you give us kind of a wrap-up of what we accomplished or didn't accomplish in the election. Right. And we'll let you go ahead and start talking. I'll pop in with a couple of questions.
Well, I'm also the third vice president for the Dayton unit in NAACP and the political action chair, so that gives me a chance to stay on top of the political issues as it confronts our units. And as many people are aware, we had three big issues on the November ballot. Issue one that dealt with the makeup of the state legislature, reapportionment. Issue two dealt with primarily knocking out issue three, which was the marijuana, but also talking about we should not put in the Constitution words dealing with monopoly or oligopolies and things of that nature. And then issue three itself was one dealing with the whole issue of marijuana, not just medical marijuana, but legalization of recreational marijuana, and all kinds of monopolies were also in that. So the voters, I think, in the final analysis made their decision, as we always do at election time, and decided what they wanted to stay and where they wanted to go. Yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of disappointments and probably a lot of reliefs statewide on that. Here locally, though, we had a lot of tight races going on.
Right.
And one point I'd like to make, we congratulate all the folks that ran for office. And to me, there's no winners or losers because they made the effort to step out trying to represent the people and the people's voice. So I guess a special thanks to the winners and also the folks that did win.
That's right. It's hard to run for public office, but I think the candidates the voters looked at, in some cases, as you pointed out, decided that we want change in face. We saw some new faces in Trotwood and Huber, and I guess in Dayton too, because we saw a couple of new judges retiring, and a new judge will be brought on one way or the other. And we should know soon, or the 20th, I guess, of the month, is when they'll do the recount or do the official count and put out the word, here are the winners for the November 2015 election. Yeah.
Right. That's always where people always expect whatever runs across that TV at night. That's the absolute when we have some other ballots to actually count.
Right.
After the ones that are done that Tuesday.
Right.
Evening.
You have overseas ballots and then those ballots that were challenged. You know, provisional ballots have to be counted. So there's always a waiting period. And I know those who were declared potential winners election night have been waiting on pins and needles to get the final word. So hopefully the other shoe will drop here in the next few days, and they will know for sure who's on first and who the next elected official is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but they're always on TV doing the comparison of numbers of the turnout and this. And I noticed, I guess for the first time, that they were comparing the 2015 election, which is a general election, to what went on in actually the presidential election as far as numbers. So I don't know, there's a difference. What actually came out of that?
Well, you know, one of the things they were looking at, I guess what some people were anticipating, somebody calls something called an off-year election, which you know me, I don't go with that. There's no such thing as off-year election. But they look at the gubernatorial race and the presidential race, and so those are what they're comparing them to. But in reality, if I was a township trustee or a school board member or a mayor or a county or city or council member, that race is just as important to me as the presidential and the gubernatorial race. So for me, there's no such thing as an off-year election. But in this particular election, we saw about 42% of the voters statewide turnout, and Montgomery County was right behind. We were like 39%. So we weren't too far off the off the state percentage of voters turnout. And so we then try to compare that to other years when we don't have a gubernatorial or a presidential election like we will have next year.
Yeah, and there's only a couple of thousand different from the last gubernatorial, I mean, not the gubernatorial, but the general election in 2013. 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a couple of thousand difference from what I noticed.
Yeah.
But I think this year the social media and the blitz, and I think and I think also the issue of the marijuana came into play with getting a lot of folks energized to come out, whether they were for it or against it.
Yeah, and I think that's what the sponsors of the issue 3 were hoping, but I don't think that's what happened. And I think they were looking at it, almost trying to make it turn out to be a gubernatorial election, but it really, the voters decided to, it was close, and I guess that's what I should say. Now in Montgomery County it wasn't that way, but statewide I think we would have to say that it was very close to what the gubernatorial race would have been. However, I think it was disappointing to them because I think the numbers say that those who supported putting issue 3 on the ballot spent almost $25 million to do that. Those that were against it spent half that. It's like $13 million against it. So it was a 2-to-1, and generally when you have a 2-to-1 spending like that, you're going to have favorable outcomes. But in this case, the voters decided overwhelmingly that this was a bad idea. However, I think the legislature now knows that there is some interest in the whole issue of medical marijuana. There was an article in several of the statewide papers that said the next day or the day afterwards that the Speaker of the House and some members were considering what we do next. And I think they will put forward a medical marijuana bill, and we probably will see some debate, and maybe even a vote. I'm not going to promise a vote. We may even see
another one in November.
Yeah, well, from the legislature on this topic. So there's some conversation that says this is an issue that voters want, and the leadership in the House heard from those leaders, and we can expect a debate on medical marijuana, I think, in the next year of the biennium General Assembly.
Well, since we're kind of talking about next year, and we're looking at maybe marijuana, is there anything else on the horizon that could possibly be?
Well, of course, the presidential election is next year, and there may be some other issues, but right now, the presidential election is the big issue on the ballot. And unlike most years, we either have a May or a June primary. Next year, Ohio will have a March primary. And so that primary will take place on, I think, March the 15th. Which means that 30 days before that is the last day for us to register to vote. So that puts a real crunch on voter registration drives. As you know, we kick off our voter registration drive officially on Dr. King's birthday weekend. That's 16th. And so that will give us 1 month to do voter registration, and we'll end on February 16th. So that could be a nice little Valentine's thought to register to vote. But it ends on February 16th of 2016, and then 30 days later, we have the presidential primary in the state of Ohio, which means everybody. Next year is not only the presidential, I think we will have 1 U.S. Senator, all members of the U.S. Congress, all members of the Ohio House of Representatives, and half of the state Senate running next year. So we'll see a lot of folks on the ballot. We may even see some issues because the issue 3 people said they're going to come back with something. But I think we will see something dealing with marijuana on the ballot as well. But we also could see if some people have the way an issue dealing with jobs and what exactly. I'm hearing some rumbles that there may be a jobs bill on the ballot. So we'll see what the issue was. But we know as far as the elected office, and I think maybe 1 or 2 county commissioners might be on the ballot as well. So we'll have a lot of local concerns on the ballot next November.
Which means a longer time in the ballot box trying to figure out who for or against.
Who you're for against, right. But, you know, the goal here is to get people excited about the election, to turn out. And even though the numbers are 40 and 39 and 30-some%, I think we need to continue to encourage people to exercise that right to vote, to show up at the polls, and to let the elected officials and others know where they stand.
Well, and it sounds like we need to start voter registration today. And give it more time to instead of a month, so not to be in such a crunch, and make sure everybody is registered. Rather than waiting till the last minute and people fall off the wagon here or there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's important for me to understand, you know, that I was at a meeting just recently, and people were talking about the voters who didn't turn out. You know, in Cuyahoga County, the number in Cuyahoga was something like 120,000. I haven't compared the numbers or percentage-wise to Montgomery County, but I would think most cities in the state of Ohio would be the same way. Voters just were not as excited. So I think we have to figure out, you know, why the voters not voting, and what we need to do to turn them out to vote. I mean, we're talking about a percentage of people who have registered to vote based on the total population. Then you have to register to vote. Then the third leg of the stool is to vote. So we've got to go back and figure out, okay, why aren't people registering to vote? Why aren't people interested in the election? Because it's one of the most important aspects of our daily lives. Who's going to speak for us in Washington and in Columbus and in city councils?
Well, I heard, I don't know how true this is, that they had some issues with machines in Cuyahoga County. Then they had issues in Hamilton County, so they ended up staying open later there. It was at 9 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe that is part of the issue too.
Well, you know what? I think that's part of it, but I think the bigger part is why people aren't going out to vote. You know, that's what I have to spend some time here in the next couple of weeks, just meeting with folks and having some coffees to figure out, you know, why aren't people interested in voting? And a lot of it could be jobs, could be the whole employment issue, could be apathy among, you know, what are these elected officials actually doing? But one of my goals here as the political action chair is to sit down with some voters, non-registered voters, find out why aren't you registered to vote, and then some registered voters to say, well, it's your right to vote or not, but why didn't you exercise the right? You know, and just see what some results might be. It may be interesting from my point of view, from NAACP's perspective on things we need to be working on.
Yeah, I knew there's issues that also came up. They came up with all voters, but there's issues about how many young folks actually voted. Because we had a big push for the presidential election, so the people were registered to vote still. They didn't get kicked out of the system, but did they actually vote?
Right, and that is one of the numbers that we have to look at. I'm sure that number is not all young people, but I'm sure there's quite a few young people who, I guess, expected a lot to happen in a short period of time, and when that didn't happen, they just decided to stay home. But there are a lot of voters who just don't exercise that right to vote once they register. We've got to figure out why and try to excite them to be actual voters. You know.
Sounds like a plan.
Yes, yeah.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
I think it's time for me to take a vacation.
Yeah. But the good news, however, is that the voters did vote for issue 1, which was dealing with redistricting. Reapportionment, rather, reapportionment. Reapportionment deals with the state legislature. Redistricting deals with the federal legislature or the federal Congress. And voters did vote for that. So part of what the voters basically said is that we would like to see state legislative districts that are fair and balanced. And So the General Assembly now has a chance to go back to the drawing board. I don't think it will be done pretty much before the 2021 or 2022 elections, because we wait for the census data before drawing up the districts. But I think if the legislature 2020 or 21 is when we get the census data, is 20. Then we can draw the districts, and hopefully the legislature will look at and hear what the voters have to say and draw fair districts so there can be balance. Some people are basically also saying that message should be carried over into Congress. Redistricting, whether that translates into the legislature doing anything about that is a different story, but I think we have a group called the Ohio Constitution Commission, and they may take this conversation up just to see if there's any interest in moving the needle one way or the other. But yeah, we, for example, have Congress lady Marcy Kaptur's district. She lives in Toledo. For the longest time, she represented the Toledo area. Then we had Congressman over here in the Cleveland area, Dennis Kucinich, who represented Cleveland. They put the two districts together. So now Marcy Kaptur, Congresswoman Kaptur's district, goes from Toledo all the way along the lake over to Cleveland. And some people call it the mistake at the lake, or the whatever they call it, the snake at the lake. But that's the way it is. And so the people of that area cannot feel like they're being represented, fairly, even though the Congresswoman is a good representative. But what interest could someone in Erie County have with the interests of someone, let's say, in Lucas County? There are different points of views and interests. So that's what districts should be, like-minded interests.
Well, isn't that part of making it fair is about who is on this group of folks, because it's going to be equal amount of Democrats, Republicans, and other entities. So it's not like who's ever in, like say the Democratic House or the Republican House has the advantage of drawing the lines. If it's equal, it's an easier maybe chance of it being a little bit different, fair.
And but also to that, what helps votes like the voters did on November, the voters have spoken, said we want fair districts, but then there's the federal courts who have spoken on the whole issue of how districts should be drawn. And so I think all of that may lead to hopefully some fairer districts at the congressional level. By far, I hope we can do a better job at the state level, because just as there are at the federal level, the state level, their interests should be similar. So a person living in one area should not have to try and represent people who have a totally different mindset. And so I hopefully think the legislature heard what the voters said. They don't sometimes, but heard what the voters said, and then go to the drawing board and draw legislative districts, state legislative, House and Senate districts that are fair and represent the people.
I volunteer to be on that board.
Okay.
I can draw a straight line.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, for the different groups, what was it? Let's see, Ohio Collaborative and Ohio Voice, and all those nonprofit, nonpartisan groups, they get together and meet as far as issue, and I think actually some of the unions are involved. There's a lot of different entities in that.
Right.
Does that group have any weight either way with any of these things?
Well, as you point out, we belong to several collaboratives, and what the group gets together on a regular basis and brings in experts, and we have a conversation. That helps us really formulate a position on these issues, and that's what we will continue to do. And then we will actually go out and advocate. I think some of the members of the group, the League of Women Voters and Common Cause, were the major pushers behind issue one. And so I think, yes, they do. Once they get, and if we go back and look at what happened in 2011, Senate Bill 5, it was some of the same coalition building people, groups, who campaigned so strong, against issue 5, which was a big push for us in the state of Ohio when it dealt with jobs. And so I think those groups make a difference. And when they get their mindset, and we do a lot of working together, collaboration, we can bring up the grassroots as well as those who live in ivory towers and work together, I think we can make a difference. And that's what I think we'll see on some of these issues. But you're right, especially on those key issues on the makeup of the General Assembly and Congress. And that's what we saw happen in November as it relates to issue 1.
Well, it's going to be an interesting year coming up. And I believe, was it Cleveland is where the Democrats are having their convention?
Don't get me there.
No, don't get
Yeah.
No, it's one of our Ohio states. It's either Columbus or Cleveland.
Okay.
And then we're going to have one of the presidential debates here at Wright State.
In Wright State, yes.
So
yeah.
that's going to be interesting. It's going to be something that our young folks, or even our older folks, have never seen before,
right,
and have never been involved in, and we'll get a chance to see it up close.
Conventions I went to one, and conventions are very interesting. They're very enlightening, educational, and emotional. So I think you're right. I forget which one, but one of them has a national in Cleveland, and this would be a great opportunity for Ohio to showcase. We are, as Ohio goes, as they say, goes the state, goes the nation. So we get to show off a little bit what we have going on in the state of Ohio. Next year is going to be a very important year for us. Yes, indeed.
Wow. Getting tired thinking about it all.
Yeah, that's why we all have to have a good holiday and get ready for, and roll up our sleeves and get ready for what's going to happen, in the next year.
Well, enjoyed sitting down and talking to you today, and I'm sure that the folks out there got a little bit better picture of what went on, what's going to be going on, and come down and join us. We can always use more help when it comes to getting out the word to folks about what's happening in this arena, in the political arena.
That's right. Give us a call.
Right.
Yeah, give us a call.
Our number is 937-222-2172. So give us a call anytime if you got questions or want to give us a question about anything. If we can't find the answer, we might be able to find somebody that does have the answer.
Right. That's it.
It'd be Senator Roberts here.
We will find the answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, again, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah.
And we'll be back with y'all next month. And have a good holiday, good Thanksgiving, and Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, all the above.
That's
and anything else I missed. I'm sure I missed
You got
somebody.
It all. You got it. Yeah.
Have a good day.